Take my hand and stay with me, my dear. I think you broke my heart again.
Snape was born to a witch mother named Eileen Snape Prince, Prince being her maiden name, and his muggle father, Tobias Snape. He grew up down on Spinner's End by the river, which was not the nicest place to live. Snape's parents argued constantly, and he couldn't wait to turn 11 and leave for Hogwarts to get away from them. His father was extremely hard to please, and was described by Snape who said, he doesn't like anything much. Snape's mother was described as a thin, sallow-faced, sour-looking woman who greatly resembled him. When Snape was around the age of 9 or 10, he took to one red-headed girl who lived near him, named Lily Evans, and watched her from afar, looking longingly after her. He noticed traits of her being a witch, and one day he decided to reveal himself and tell her about what she was, something he had been planning for a very long time. Things didn't work out the way he'd hoped. When he told Lily that she was a witch, Lily being muggle-born, and not knowing anything about witches and wizards, took offense to being called that. Then he proceeded to call Lily's older sister, Petunia, a muggle. And although Petunia did not know what the word meant, she recognized the tone, and she told Lily that they were leaving. Lily obeyed immediately and gave Snape a glaring look as they left. Eventually, Lily started to trust Severus, and they actually became friends. While Snape and Lily were at the Evans house, Snape found a Hogwarts letter in Petunia's room, and couldn't believe that a muggle was able to send letters to Hogwarts, so he immediately opened it. It was a letter Petunia had written to Dumbledore, begging him to see if she could go to Hogwarts with her younger sister, and Dumbledore politely said he was sorry, but she couldn't. One day, Snape and Lily were sitting in the woods, and Snape tells her about Hogwarts, the Ministry of Magic, Azkaban, Dementors, and underage sorcery. Lily then asks if being a muggle-born makes any difference, and Snape tells her no, it doesn't. Petunia was hiding behind a bush, listening to all of this, and she lost her balance to reveal herself. Petunia insulted Snape's ragged clothes and asked if he was wearing his mother's blouse. Then a branch above Petunia fell on her shoulder. Lily rounded on Snape. "Did you make that happen?" "No." "You did. You hurt her." She gave him one last burning look and ran after her sister. When it was finally time to go to Hogwarts, Snape watched Lily and her family at platform 9 3/4, and he heard Petunia say that she didn't want to go to Hogwarts, and she said that Lily and Snape were weirdos going to a school for freaks. This made Lily cry, and she brought up the letter that Petunia had written to Dumbledore. This led to Petunia pulling away and ignoring her sister as she boarded the train. This would be a huge crossroad in the sisters' relationship, and they would never be the same again.
My perfect sister being who she was, I was the only one to see her for what she was. A freak.
On the train, Snape saw Lily crying about her fight with her sister. She told him how Petunia hates her, and Snape responded saying, "So what?" Lily gave him a look of dislike, but Snape made Lily smile when he said, "This is it. We're going to Hogwarts. You better be in Slytherin." These last words drew the attention of a boy named James Potter. He said proudly that he wanted to be in Gryffindor. At this, Snape made a despairing noise. This made James and his new friend Sirius round on Snape, which made Lily angry, and she and Snape left the compartment. James tried to trip Snape on his way out. "See ya, Snivelus." When it was time to be sorted into their houses, Lily was sorted into Gryffindor, and at these words, Snape let out a tiny groan. As Lily went to the Gryffindor table, she glanced back at Snape with a sad little smile on her face. When it was time for Snape to be sorted, he was put in Slytherin and walked to the other side of the hall, being separated from Lily, the thing above all he did not want to happen. Lucius Malfoy, a prefect at the time, patted him on the back as he took his spot at the Slytherin table. Snape excelled at most subjects, but mainly defense against the dark arts and potions. He nicknamed himself the Half-Blood Prince.
"I'm the Half-Blood Prince,"
which derived from him being half-blood, meaning being born from one wizard and one muggle, and he took Prince from his mother's maiden name. He wrote all sorts of notes in his potion book, including multiple spells that he created, including his famous spell, Sectum Sempra, that sliced open the victim based on the wand movements they did, much like a blade or a sword. He went through his potions textbook and made changes to the instructions and actually made it better than the text by adding or doing little things a bit differently than instructed. During his Hogwarts years, he and James, along with James's friends, were continually going at each other. It was described by Dumbledore that they detested each other. James and his friends called Snape Severus and bullied him on a regular basis.
Who wants to see me take off Snivel's trousers?
One student and one of James's best friend, Remus Lupin, who was a werewolf, was brought out to the Shrieking Shack through the entrance of the Whomping Willow, where Lupin would go every month as he went through his transformation. Snape was very interested in where Lupin was going every month, and Sirius told Snape where the entrance to the shack was and how to get past the tree. Snape followed Sirius's instructions, and when he was almost at the shack, James grabbed him at great personal risk of his own and saved Snape from being killed by Lupin. Snape refused to admit that James did this for him, but rather to save his and his friend's own necks. Snape was extremely angry that he was in James's debt, but he would later make them even, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Snape and Lily continued to be friends while at Hogwarts, but many of Lily's friends would question her decision to hang out with Severus. She would continually make excuses for him to her friends, but she didn't like the people that he was hanging out with, and one day she confronted him about it. She started to tell him that she didn't like what some of his friends were doing, because they involved dark magic and cruel jokes on people. Snape got angry about this. What about the stuff Potter and his mates get up to? He was unable to hold in his resentment toward them. Lily asked what they have to do with anything, and he started to tell her about how they sneak out at night. And Lily asked him why he's so obsessed with them, and why he cares what they do at night. Snape says that he's trying to show her that they aren't as wonderful as everyone thinks. Lily replies saying, at least they don't use dark magic. Then she accuses him of being ungrateful after what happened a few nights before when James saved Snape. Saved? Saved? You think he was playing the hero? He was saving his neck and his friends too. You're not going to... I won't let you. Snape telling Lily what he will and won't let her do got her very angry, and Snape backtracked and said he just didn't want to see her be made a fool of, and that James likes her. She assures him that she doesn't like James, and she thinks he's an arrogant toe rag. These words made Snape relieved. During his 5th year after he finished his OWLs, he was confronted by James and Sirius, next to the lake where Lily was sitting.
Snape!
Snape tried to pull his wand out, but James disarmed him.
Expelliarmus!
Nice one, James.
James and Sirius started to make fun of his big nose and greasy hair. Lily came over and told James and Sirius to leave him alone. James says to Lily that if she goes out with him, then he'll do what she says and leave Snape alone for good. She replies by saying she'd rather go out with the squid from the Great Lake. While James was distracted by Lily, Snape got up, got his wand, and shot a spell at James that made a gash appear on his face that spat out blood. James shot back and made Snape hang upside down, which showed off his graying underpants, and many people cheered as Sirius and James roared with laughter. Lily's face twitched for a slight second as though she was about to smile, before she told James to let him down. James obeyed and threw Snape higher in the air and allowed him to drop hard on the ground. Snape tried to get them back, but Sirius performed a spell on him that made him fall over and made him unable to move. Lily then took her own wand out and forced them to release the curse so that Snape could move again. You're lucky Evans was here, Snivelus. I don't need help from filthy mudbloods like her. These words deeply hurt Lily, who responded saying, fine, I won't bother in future. And I'd wash your pants if I were you, Snivelus.
Exploratory studies at IUP. Get to the best version of you.
Later, Snape begged for Lily's forgiveness. Lily says it's too late, and that she's made excuses for him for years. She accuses Snape and his friends of aiming to be Death Eaters, and Snape doesn't deny it, confirming Lily's accusation. Lily says that he's chosen his way, and she's chosen her way, and turned and walked away from Snape. Snape didn't see much of Lily over the years. He moved on to his dreams of becoming a Death Eater and joining Voldemort, while Lily settled down with James, which I'm sure destroyed Snape, seeing the love of his life with his worst enemy. Snape served the Dark Lord as one of his loyal Death Eaters, and on Voldemort's orders, Snape went after a teaching job at Hogwarts so he could spy on Dumbledore for him. One day, Snape overheard a conversation between Sybil Trelawney and Dumbledore, where Trelawney foretold of a prophecy that would later be associated with Harry and Voldemort. He goes to Voldemort and tells him about the prophecy, and Voldemort realizes it could either be about Neville Longbottom or Harry Potter, and he decides to go after Harry Potter, the son of Lily Potter, the love of Snape's life. When Snape realizes he's going after the Potters, he begs to meet with Dumbledore. Dumbledore agrees. Snape tells him that Voldemort thinks the prophecy is about Lily's son. He tells Dumbledore how he begged for the Dark Lord to spare Lily. Dumbledore says to Snape, "You disgust me." You do not care then about the deaths of her husband and child? They can die as long as you have what you want? He then begs Dumbledore to hide them all, to keep them all safe. Dumbledore asks Snape what he will give him in return. Snape replies saying,
Anything.
Dumbledore ensures a plan to keep the Potters safe, but Lily and James put their faith in Peter Pettigrew, who betrays them and gives up their location to Voldemort. Voldemort goes to their house and kills James and Lily, and tries to kill Harry, but is unable to due to the protection that Lily gave her son when she gave her life to save him. When Snape got the news that Lily died, he fell on the ground crying and was described as this. He looked like a man that had lived 100 years of misery.
You said you would keep her safe.
Lily and James put their faith in the wrong person, Severus. Rather like you.
Dumbledore tells Snape that Lily's son has her beautiful green eyes and asks Snape if he remembers the shape and color of them. Don't! I wish I were dead. And what use would that be to anyone? If you loved Lily Evans, if you truly loved her, then your way forward is clear. You know how and why she died. Make sure it was not in vain. Help me protect Lily's son.
No one can know.
I should never reveal the best of you, Severus.
After Voldemort's demise, Snape continues to teach at Hogwarts as the Potions Master, and when the head of Slytherin House, Horace Slughorn, retires, Snape takes up the post as head of the house. When Harry first arrives at Hogwarts, Snape immediately treats him poorly, his way to spite his worst enemy, James, Harry's father. Dumbledore tells Snape to keep an eye on Quirrell, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and he does just that.
You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell.
On Halloween, a troll is led into the school. While everyone is taking care of that, Snape realizes that Quirrell was the one that let the troll in, and he was using it as a distraction to go get the Philosopher's Stone. Snape follows him to the entrance, where a three-headed dog is guarding it. He stops Quirrell, but he sustains an injury to his leg from the three-headed dog. Later that year, when Quirrell tries to jinx Harry's broomstick during a Quidditch match, Snape performs counter curses trying to save Harry. Snape protects Harry all year. Dumbledore believes that this was his way of making him and James even, after James saved his life all those years ago. Then he could go back to hating your father's memory in peace. The next few years, Snape continues to mistreat Harry and his friends, and favor students from his own house, such as Draco Malfoy. During the events of Goblet of Fire, Snape's dark mark, the mark of the Death Eaters, begins to get darker, meaning Voldemort is gaining more life and getting more power.
It's a sign, Severus. You know what it means as well as I.
At the end of the term, Voldemort finally returns to a full and complete body, and he calls all of his Death Eaters back to him. Snape does not return. Later that night, Dumbledore sends Snape on a secret mission to spy on Voldemort, and tell Voldemort that Dumbledore sent him, making him a triple agent, still loyal to Dumbledore. He returned to Voldemort just as Dumbledore said, 2 hours after all the other Death Eaters. And he explained to Voldemort that the reason he stayed at Hogwarts after his demise was because he, like so many others, thought the Dark Lord was finished. And having Dumbledore as his alibi was a good protection while all the other Death Eaters were being questioned and locked up.
Severus Snape was indeed a Death Eater, and prior to Lord Voldemort's downfall, turned spy for us at great personal risk. Today's no more a Death Eater than I am.
Voldemort didn't complain to this because Snape had many years of information on Dumbledore. Snape continues to pretend to be on Voldemort's side, on Dumbledore's orders, and feeds him useful information, but doesn't give him the most crucial details. Snape's skill in occlumency, meaning mind reading and blocking others from reading your mind, was matched by no others but Voldemort himself, and Snape was able to block Voldemort from reading his mind, ensuring that his cover was not blown. Snape would continue to play as a triple agent and would join the Order of the Phoenix, the allegiance Dumbledore formed to fight Voldemort and his Death Eaters, and would reveal information to Voldemort about the Order, just as Dumbledore had requested. Voldemort still having no idea that Snape was still loyal to Dumbledore and not him, showing just how powerful Snape was at occlumency. The summer before Harry's 6th year, Dumbledore came to Snape after he had put the Gaunt Ring, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, on, and the curse threatened to take over his whole body and kill him. Snape came and stopped the curse from spreading past Dumbledore's hand. Dumbledore asks Snape how long he has to live before the curse will kill him, and Snape tells him he has maybe a year to live. Dumbledore then brings up the plan that Voldemort has to have Draco Malfoy kill him.
We both know Lord Voldemort has ordered the Malfoy boy to murder me.
This was punishment for his father Lucius's many failures, like a few months earlier, where he failed to get the prophecy. Dumbledore tells Snape to find out what Draco is up to and offer him help and guidance. Dumbledore then tells Snape that he must be the one to kill him.
You must be the one to kill me, Severus. It is the only way.
His reasoning being that he's going to die in a year anyway, and he doesn't want Draco to go down a dark path. That boy's soul is not yet damaged. I would not have it ripped apart on my account. It takes a bit of arguing, but Snape finally agrees, and Dumbledore makes him promise that when he's gone, Snape will make sure that the children of Hogwarts are always safe. Before the start of term, Draco's mother, Narcissa Malfoy, accompanied by her sister Bellatrix, come to Snape in Spinner's Ends, and Narcissa asks him if he can watch over Draco and help him complete the task that Voldemort gave him. It is here that Bellatrix questions him and his loyalty to the Dark Lord, and to test that loyalty, she tells him to make an unbreakable vow, saying that he will watch over Draco, and if Draco should fail to kill Dumbledore, Snape himself will finish the task. If you break an unbreakable vow, you die.
Who is the most submissive and breedable character of these four dudes? Who can spin on that like a Beyblade, and who is flipping guys like pancakes?
At the start of term, he notices that Tonks Patronus has turned into Lupin's. In the magical world, if you love someone enough, your Patronus will match whatever the love of your life's Patronus is. And this is the case with Tonks, who is in love with Lupin. Snape sees this and comments on it. Snape tried to help Draco during the school year, just as he promised Narcissa and Dumbledore. But Draco refused help, saying he didn't want Snape to steal his thunder.
I swore to protect you. I made the unbreakable vow. No! I was chosen. This is my moment.
One day, Snape and Dumbledore get in an argument, Snape saying that Dumbledore doesn't trust him, and that Dumbledore took too much for granted. He said he didn't want to kill Dumbledore anymore, and that Dumbledore was asking too much of him.
Has it ever crossed your brilliant mind that I don't want to do this anymore?
Dumbledore replies saying that he gave him his word, and that Snape should meet him later that night. It is here that Dumbledore finally confides in Snape. He tells Snape that a time will come when Voldemort starts to fear the life of his snake Nagini, and when that time comes, he must tell Harry the truth. The truth that on the night when Voldemort tried to kill him, part of Voldemort's soul was ripped apart and it latched itself onto Harry. And if Voldemort is to be killed, Harry must first die, and Voldemort himself must be the one to kill him. Snape looks at Dumbledore questioning everything and gets angry. I thought all these years we were protecting him. For her. For Lily.
You've kept him alive so he can die at the proper moment.
You have used me. I have spied for you and lied for you, put myself in mortal danger for you. Everything was supposed to be to keep Lily Potter's son safe. Now you tell me that you've been raising him like a pig for slaughter? Have you grown to care for the boy after all? For him? Snape then takes out his wand and casts his Patronus, a silver doe, the same Patronus as Lily. Dumbledore turns to Snape with tears in his eyes.
Lily, after all this time,
Always.
A few months later, Draco's plans to kill Dumbledore finally come into play, but he isn't able to do it. Instead, Snape comes up and does what he promised Dumbledore he would do 1 year earlier. Snape fled Hogwarts with Bellatrix, Draco, and a few other Death Eaters, but Harry was trying to stop him before he actually escaped. Snape blocked all of Harry's curses with ease, until Harry called him a coward.
Fight back! You coward, fight back!
A coward. This was the thing that Snape was farthest from. The man who gave up everything for this boy. The man who loved this boy's mother more than anything in the world. The man who put himself in mortal danger every day to protect him. He was not a coward. Snape's face was suddenly demented, inhuman, as though he was in as much pain as the yelping, howling dog stuck in the burning house behind them. Don't call me a coward. After the incidents that took place that night, after Dumbledore's death, Snape continued to speak to Dumbledore's portrait. The portrait tells him to tell Voldemort the correct night that Harry is leaving Privet Drive, so his loyalty to Voldemort is not questioned. But the portrait also suggests making the Order use decoys to ensure Harry's safety. Snape then meets with Mundungus Fletcher in a tavern and confunds him, meaning he used one of the 3 unforgivable curses to make Mundungus do his bidding. He tells Mundungus to suggest to the Order to use decoys with Polyjuice Potion to make 7 identical Harrys. Snape tells Voldemort the correct night when Harry is leaving. Because of this, the Death Eaters are able to ambush the Order. During this chase, one Death Eater had their wand pointed right at Lupin's back. Snape saw this and cast a spell that he created, Sectum Sempra. He was aiming for the Death Eater's wand, but it instead hit George Weasley's ear, which badly injured him. One night, Snape decided to go back to the old headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. While there, he stumbles upon the letter written by Lily to Sirius, along with a picture of Lily laughing at baby Harry on a broomstick, along with James. Tears were dripping from the end of his hooked nose. Snape takes the part of the letter that says, "Lots of love, Lily," and puts it in his pocket. He then rips the picture in two and keeps the part of Lily laughing. Snape is appointed headmaster of Hogwarts and keeps his promise to Dumbledore that he would keep the children safe. Upon receiving the job, Snape takes Gryffindor's sword that was in the headmaster's office and hides it in the wall behind the portrait of Dumbledore and replaces the sword with a fake one. The Minister for Magic, Rufus Scrimgeour, takes the fake sword thinking it's the real one because it was in Dumbledore's will to Harry. This ensures that Harry knows that he needs the sword, but the real sword is still safe, so Snape can give it to him later on. Later that year, the portrait of Dumbledore is informed that the trio is in the Forest of Dean. The portrait of Dumbledore tells Snape to take the sword there, but not to reveal himself, in case Voldemort reads Harry's mind through occlumency and sees Snape helping him, thereby blowing Snape's cover. Snape goes to the Forest of Dean and produces his Patronus, a doe, and that doe leads Harry to the sword. Near the end of that term, Harry returned to Hogwarts, and Dumbledore's army, the Order of the Phoenix, and the heads of houses drove Snape out when he was outnumbered. A huge battle throughout the castle and the grounds takes place, and later that evening, Snape is summoned by Voldemort himself in the Shrieking Shack. Snape realizes how closely Voldemort is keeping his snake Nagini, just as Dumbledore said he would, and he knows it's time to tell Harry the truth. Unfortunately, the reason why Voldemort called him was so that he could kill Snape. Voldemort thinking that if he does this, he would be the true owner of the Elder Wands. Voldemort released his snake Nagini on Snape, who wrapped around him, making Snape lose color in his face until Voldemort spoke the words,
Nagini, kill.
Harry took off the invisibility cloak and looked down upon the man he hated, whose widening black eyes found Harry as he tried to speak.
Take them.
Memories poured out of Snape, and Harry put them in a flask. These were the memories that told Harry the truth of Snape being a triple agent, the truth that he was always loyal to Dumbledore, the truth that Harry must die in order for Voldemort to be killed, the truth that Snape loved Harry's mother. The green eyes found the black eyes.
You have your mother's eyes.
But after a second, something in the depths of the dark pair seemed to vanish, and Snape moved no more. Snape truly was one of Dumbledore's most loyal followers, and the reason Voldemort never suspected